Hello and welcome to another video tutorial by Easy Academy. In this video, I am covering Apache Kafka 3.1.0. This release just came out today and it has a lot of very exciting features that I'm going to be discussing in this video with you. Now, there are going to be some KIPs where I'm going to do a deep dive on. Some of them I will just briefly mention it. If you're not familiar with what a KIP is in the Apache project, in the Apache Kafka project, a KIP stands for Kafka Improvement Proposal. So these are documentation or proposals that are being made by contributors to the project to discuss what is going to be approved and what is going to be going to the project. So in this particular release, there are several improvements that have been added, and that's what I'm going to be covering in this video. The outline is that I will do an overview of the release. I will talk about some of the components that went into the core Kafka as well as the client components. Then we're going to cover Kafka streams and then cover MirrorMaker. Now, there are other components of the Apache Kafka project that were not affected by this release in a major way, but these are just some of the high levels. Something like Kafka Connect was not really impacted that much in this release. I will also briefly cover some of the KIPs that missed this particular release that I'm really looking forward to seeing in the upcoming release in release 3.2. Now let's get started with this particular release. So the first thing that I want to cover is KIP number 748. So KIP number 748 talks about adding broker count metrics so that we can keep track of two types of brokers, the active brokers and the fenced brokers. Now, if you're not familiar with what a fenced broker is, basically when a broker is getting up to speed, when the cluster is just booting up, or sometimes after the cluster is running, some of the brokers may be behind in the amount of metadata that they have, and because of this, the protocol and the mechanism in the cluster kind of like isolates them and takes them away from being able to save client requests. So as you can see here on the screen, we have these different statuses where it goes from offline to fenced to online, and then when it does not have enough metadata, it goes back into the fenced status. When it has enough metadata and it has caught up, it comes back into the online status. So this particular KIP number, let me check it again. KIP number 748 was just to allow us to keep track of which brokers are in this fenced status where they're not able to save request, and which brokers are in the active pool that are able to save request. So that's what this particular KIP was about. The next one is KIP number 768. So this is basically adding the ability to use identity providers like Auth0 and Microsoft Azure Active Directory to support your configuration between your brokers and your clients. So that was something that was added in this particular release, and if you take a look at the KIP here, you're going to find all the details of the implementation that was done. Now, the initial work started in KIP number 255, and then it was completed and made production ready in KIP number 768. So more details will be available, but if you have a use case where you are trying to configure identity providers like Microsoft Azure Active Directory or Auth0 to make it work with your broker and client configuration, this is something that you should definitely take a look at and figure out how to configure that for your project. So let's move on to the next one. Now, coming back to stream. So in the previous one, we just covered all the ones for the core Kafka components and the Kafka client component. In this one here, I'm going to be focusing on Kafka streams in particular. So KIP number 633, this is about controlling the grace period for windowed operations. Sometimes when you're having aggregates or you're having certain windowed operations like the ones for joins in Kafka streams, the default grace period is 24 hours. Now, for somebody that is just getting started with Kafka streams, this can be very confusing where you're waiting for a very long time before you are able to see the output that you are expecting. So that is because the grace period is 24 hours and that grace period has to complete before the operation is finalized. Now with this new KIP, what we are able to do is we are able to allow you to specify either to control the amount of grace period that you're putting, or to specify no grace period at all. So let's take a look at the KIP number 633 to see the details of that. Now, this KIP was already added in Kafka 3.0, but it was incomplete because we had 4 different classes that were impacted. So time windows made it into the 3.0 release. The changes for session windows made it into the 3.0 release, and the changes for sliding windows made it to 3.0 release. But the changes for join windows was not added to the 3.0 release because of a last-minute regression defect that was discovered. But in this particular release, these changes have been merged in. So with this particular KIP, you are now able to specify no grace, or you can specify your own grace period. So this gives the developer, or it gives the user, more control, and they are actively aware of how much grace period has been specified in the window operation that they're looking to do. So this is something that I'm very excited about, and I contributed to some of the logic here, and I partnered with Sophie Blee-Goldman to make this happen with some of the other contributors for the Kafka project. So I was very excited about this particular feature being completed and released in the 2 Kafka versions. So let's take a look at the next one. This one is KIP number 761. So this is about adding the total block time metrics to Kafka streams, which allows us effectively to understand how much is the streams application waiting for things to happen, and how much time is actually being spent in processing the actual event data from Apache Kafka. So this particular KIP allows us to keep track of the block time, where it is just waiting for input from Kafka brokers, and how much time is being spent in processing the data. So that's the general gist for that one. And then with this one here, we now have the ability in these 2 KIPs. The first one is KIP number 763, which allows us to do range queries with open endpoints. So before now, you typically would have to have a bounded query where the first value in that query cannot be null, and the end value in that query cannot be null. But in these 2 KIPs, and in these 3 different stores, we are now able to specify a null value for the opening part of the range, and then we're now also able to specify a null value for the ending part of the range. And if you don't specify, if it's null, that means that it is going to be the first value that is available in the store, and if it's null in the ending part, that means that it is the last value that is available on the store. So this is something that was just added, where the interface is still the same, but the values for the beginning part of the range and the ending part of the range was modified to allow null values to implicitly specify that we can find out, we can start from the first value in the store and then also go to the last value in the store if necessary. So that is what KIP 763 and KIP number 766 allowed us to do. They're kind of like very similar, except that the first one is for ReadOnlyKeyValueStore, whereas the second one supports is intended and directed towards ReadOnlySessionStore and ReadOnlyWindowStore. Now going on to KIP number 775. In KIP number 775, before this change was added to 3.1, the subscription topic and the other topic had to be kind of co-partitioned by using the default partitioner, but this particular KIP allows you to specify a custom partitioner to support these foreign key joins in your Streams application. And then finally we added KIP number 783 that allows us to keep track of exceptions, particularly to find out which task exactly caused this operation to have an exception. So that is something that was added in this particular KIP. Then I'm going to move on to MirrorMaker. Now MirrorMaker allows you to provide some kind of disaster recovery support, where if you are trying to copy data from one cluster to another, or if you're trying to back up data from your primary cluster to another cluster, you can do that. KIP number 690 was added so that we can specify and control which topics are used for some of the internal tracking mechanisms like heartbeats and offsets for MirrorMaker. Before now, these internal topics were kind of hard-coded, and if you are in an environment where you don't really have control over that, that could lead to problems. But now we are able to specify the topics, the internal topics that we want to use, and that will be used by this MirrorMaker setup and configuration to do what needs to be done instead of using the hard-coded internal topics. Then now I want to move on to KIPs that missed the cut for the 3.1 release. Now Kafka has had several KIPs that have been added, like KIP 500, which is the removal of Zookeeper. That is kind of very transformational and has really changed the direction of the project by allowing it to scale. This is another KIP that I think would really make Apache Kafka scale very much, because it essentially decouples the need to bundle your compute needs and your storage needs on the same machine that is supporting the deployment of the brokers. So with KIP number 405, we should be able to decouple storage from compute and basically be able to use object stores and remote storage like HDFS, like Azure Blob Storage, like Azure Data Lake Store, like Amazon S3 buckets and GCP cloud storage. So things like this will allow you to essentially scale infinitely the storage ability and capability of your Kafka cluster without having to bundle the compute with that horizontal scaling as well. So this is something that means the 3.1 release, and I really hope that the community can make this happen in the 3.2 release, and this is something that will really change the Apache Kafka project. And then in KIP number 618, this is something that is for Kafka Connect, where the ability to support exactly one semantics is intended to be added for source connectors that bring data from other data stores into the Apache Kafka brokers. And then recently we had this security vulnerability with Log4j 2. So the community is working to upgrade Log4j from version 1 to version 2 and use the latest Log4j 2 dependencies in the Apache Kafka project for logging. So this is something that the community hopes to bring in the 3.1 release, which missed the this is something that the community hopes to bring in the 3.2 release that means the 3.1 release. And then we have this other capability in Kafka Streams that is intended to provide high availability for the streams by controlling which rack the stream instance is running on. So this is something that if you are interested and you're looking forward to using this, you can take a look at the KIP and see what is coming up in the next release or the future releases. So that was everything for today. If you really like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to my channel. Also share the video with anyone you think will benefit from videos from my channel. Subscribe and then click on the notification icon so that when similar content is being published, you will be the first to find out. You can also support the channel by visiting Patreon. The link is available and you can become a patron and support the channel as well. Also, I have content that I post regularly at Twitter, where you can follow me to see updates that I have available. And then obviously my website, easyacademy.com, is where I typically have things about myself and the blogs and the courses that I put out. And then I have a course that focuses on how to leverage open source software to process data, to store data, to aggregate data, and to analyze data. So if this is something that you're interested in, please feel free to check out the course and let me know. So thank you very much for your time. Subscribe to the channel and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.